Hi class. I hope that after watching part one and part two, quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing, that you will have a better understanding of how to use three of these strategies to incorporate sources into your writing. So one main challenge of research writing is to figure out what to do after you find your sources and you have found quotes that you want to use and like that. So again, after you've taken notes, after you've found your sources, you've taken notes, you've annotated, you've dissected the articles beyond more than necessary, possibly. You've read through the article, you are one with that, and now you have to decide, how am I going to get that information and transfer it over into my integrated research essay in the most effective way possible? So the answer to that is you can do that through quoting, summarizing, and paraphrasing in the most appropriate way. And each of these tactics have different purposes. So if we look at to summarize, you would summarize when you need to get the gist but not all the details. You would paraphrase when you need to get the information, including details, but there is no compelling reason to use the author's words. The three reasons to use a direct quote. The first, the words are compelling or strikingly original, and you cannot do justice to them in a paraphrase. In other words, if there's no the author just said something so impactful and so striking that there is no other way to say this. It's just said perfectly, and maybe it has more impact coming directly in the original form. Another reason to use a direct quote is that the passage explains key or difficult concepts in a more clear way than you possibly can. And the third reason, the passage presents an opposing view, and you want to ensure that you are being fair to the author's reasoning. I also would like to just keep in mind that when you do a direct quote, or the reason that you select a direct quote is that something cannot be duplicated in a more impactful way. An example of that would be, there is this documentary on the Holocaust called Shoah. And while making the film, the filmmakers had interviewed a Polish man who had been an engineer on the trains that brought people to the camps. And when they interviewed him decades later, they asked him how he felt about the role he had played. And he said, as a direct quote, "If you could lick my heart, it would poison you." And so, in a sense, that direct quote is so strikingly, it's so compelling. It has such a, it leaves you with a feeling much more than if you were to say he felt really bad. Um, so, you want to keep that in mind. And another thing is that when it comes to integrating sources into your paper, there is no set quota on how many summaries you should have, how many paraphrases, or how many direct quotes. But do keep this in mind. The rule of thumb for research writing is that you want to have 10 to 20% of your paper be comprised of the summary, paraphrases, and direct quotes. And I would urge you to do a variety, but it all depends on what the context is. Um, so, in other words, and I would also stress that you don't want the direct quotes or your sources to speak for you. Your writing should be what builds your argument, and it's another way for us to see that you can articulate an argument using your own words and not having to rely on the evidence to speak for you. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so summarizing. When it comes to summarizing, this is the approach that you should use. when you want to determine if this is the best option for you. So the first step you should do is to read the original passage carefully, underline or highlight the main ideas only. This is called annotating. What is essential to convey, what is a detail or support, and you want to omit the latter. Okay. Again, you want to, this is very important. The third bullet here is you should not include your own interpretation of the information. A summary represents the author's thoughts, not yours. And last is you want to keep the summary passage significantly shorter than the original. And you will see here an example of an original passage in its summary. So the original passage reads, "We regularly engage in several different types of listening. When we are turning our attention to a song we like, or a poetry reading, or actions in a play, or sitcom antics on television, we are listening for pleasure, also known as appreciative listening. When we are listening to a friend or family member, we are building our relationship with another through offering support and showing empathy for her feelings in a situation she is discussing. We are engaged in relational listening. Therapists, counselors, and conflict mediators are trained in another level known as empathetic or therapeutic listening. When we are at a political event, attending a debate, or enduring a salesperson touting the benefits of various brands of a product, we engage in critical listening. This requires us to be attentive to key points that influence or confirm our judgments. When we are focused on gaining information, whether from a teacher in a classroom setting or a pastor at a church, we are engaged in informational listening. So quite the first thing you will notice visually is that the summary on the right-hand side is significantly shorter, about 50% shorter than the original passage. And if I read the summary, it says, we do several types of listening: appreciative listening for pleasure, and relational listening to help us build bonds with others. Empathetic or therapeutic listening is used by practitioners in helping professions. Information listening is needed when we need to understand content. So as you can see, what is in the summary is what is absolutely essential. And when you are looking at your articles, you want to look at the beginning and ends of paragraphs for the information that you can transfer into your summary. Everything in the middle is not probably necessary. And and so again, on the summary on the right-hand side, you can see that there are basic definitions were left out and only includes the examples. Okay. Also, you will see that on the right-hand side, it has the citation of the author. Okay. So now, paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is a bit more of a challenging skill, and that's going to require you to do that more often. It's going to take some time to get comfortable with this approach, and the reason being is with the first bullet here is you read and reread the original until you understand it, and then you put it aside. And what I would suggest is to ensure that you understand what you are trying to paraphrase is you set it aside and then you orally dictate what the article is about. And if you can do it in the order of each paragraph, and if you can recite some key points or the gist of it, then you can appropriately do a paraphrase. If you are having trouble with that, then I would suggest taking it paragraph by paragraph and trying to understand each paragraph in itself, and then look at the bigger picture and then bring it all back together. So, when you paraphrase, as I said, you read and read until you understand it. You can recite it. And then, second, you would change the word choices and sentence structure. You can include a quotation, and you will see an example of that in a minute. Just like the summary, you will not give your own interpretation or analysis in the paraphrase because that is not the purpose of a paraphrase. And the biggest difference between a paraphrase and a summary is that the length should remain as the original. Okay, so here is an example of a paraphrase. We have the original on the left and a suitable paraphrase on the right. So I'm not going to read the original passage on the left-hand side. You can peruse that. You could pause this video and you can look at it, but you will see that it does include a quote in there. And the reason I'm going to let you read this on your own is that I am going to show you in a minute. I want to show you, I'm going to make this small in a second, and I'm going to pull this up here to another video. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see. Let's see if this will work. Here we go. So this is coming from, I pulled that passage from the Writing Center, University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I like this because it shows what makes a successful and an unsuccessful paraphrase. And if you look at this, this is the original passage, and then it shows you a word for word plagiarism. And you can see all that is what is highlighted. If you write a paraphrase that has similar sentence structure, similar words, you are essentially or indirectly plagiarizing, and you cannot do that. And it gives an example of a patchwork paraphrase and explains why it is plagiarism. And then we have a legitimate paraphrase. And I will just read this here. This is a legitimate paraphrase because the writer has documented Chase's material in specific language by direct reference to the author and by quotation marks around the language taken directly from the source. You will notice that the writer has modified Chase's language and structure and has added material to fit the new context and purpose to present the distinctive functions of experts and non-experts in several professions. So I'm going to include this link. I'm going to go back to my presentation here. I am going to include, and this is the page there, I will include in the module this link so you can peruse this a little bit more, and I will include the handout. So this is the end of part 1. I will be picking up with part 2 in just a moment. Thank you, everyone.